time. So I see some shirts here for Alzheimer's. We're thinking about here some money for research at the National Institutes of Health. I would agree with that. You know, I have a plan to balance the federal budget, and when people say they have a plan to balance the federal budget, do you believe that? I didn't think you did. Why don't you take a stand? Oh, AARP, okay. So you, when I say I have a plan to balance the budget, do you believe that? You will? Man, will you? Now we're talking, okay? See, I like to talk about what I have done because I think, you tell me if I'm wrong about this, because I'm just, kind of a salesman in a way. I think that if I can show you that I've done it a couple times before, and now I tell you I can do it again, I hope that the record of the past would convince you that I could do it again. So I was the chairman of the budget committee in Washington when we did balance the budget. We cut taxes, and when I left, we had a $5 trillion projected surplus, all of which was blown, unfortunately, but we had it. And we'd also cut taxes. And then I got out of politics for 10 years. I served on the Defense Committee, which we all talked about last night. And then I went to Ohio and took a state that was really in big trouble. We had lost 350,000 jobs. We had our operating budget was in the hole by 20%. We had an $8 billion hole, and we were going to be downgraded, our credit. And today we have a $2 billion surplus. We're up almost 400,000 jobs. Our credit is very strong, and Ohio's economy is booming, and it's diversified. So the same formula that you need to use, that I've used in Washington before and in Ohio, what is it? It's common sense regulations, it's tax cuts that spur economic growth, and it's restraining government spending. And if you do those things, you will get yourself to economic growth. And I know that we're all thinking about national security, but if we don't have a strong economy, that really hurts us, and it impedes our ability to be able to actually do the things that we need to do. Now, in the course of balancing a budget, you have to have priorities. Everything doesn't get treated the same. Some things go up and some things go down. When I was a budget chairman, I give a lot of credit to Newt Gingrich for this. And Newt felt, and I completely agreed with him, that we needed to double the budget for the National Institutes of Health. So some things can go up and other things can go down. But when it comes to medical research, it's something that is really important for us. Now, what we have to do when we look at this, however, is to make sure we're not just throwing money at a problem that's not being used effectively. I don't know this to be the case, and I have to check, and if somebody who works with me will make a note, I need to make sure that we are not paying too much overhead to our universities who do a lot of research. In other words, we don't want to waste any money. I know you would feel as strongly about that as I do. And so I think the National Institutes of Health are very important. In terms of Social Security, I had a plan that I had introduced in 98 or 99 that would have extended Social Security for, 100 years, 75 years. And it would have changed the initial calculation that baby boomers would have received and would have given our youngest people a 2% private account where they would be able to grow with the growth in the economy in addition to Social Security. The politicians didn't do anything. Sort of like going to a doctor, and the doctor says, well, you need to come back because you've got a problem, and you go back like 10 years later, and then they say, go to the doctor, well, what can you do for me? And I feel a little bit like that in this position. Now, can we get to a point where we can stabilize Social Security? The answer is yes. We know that in the period of 30, 29, in that whole decade of the 30s, that we're going to have to make some changes, and the people who are the upper income people are going to have to receive less than what they currently get. People who are not the upper, and we haven't set those numbers yet as to upper income would be, I don't want to throw a number out, but it's going to be more than $20,000. But if you have more in retirement earnings, then you're going to have to take less, but everybody else would be able to get what they need. It's a matter of demographics. And so if somebody says they can just come and fix it and nobody has to make any sacrifice, they're not leveling with you, and I don't want to do that. Now, we don't have all the numbers worked out to figure out at what point that starts. We also know that today your initial benefit calculation is wages and prices, and we would just use one element to set that initial standard. That's a complicated formula, but we want to make sure that our seniors who are heavily dependent on this program are going to get it. And by the way, I've worked very, very closely with the AARP, both in Washington and in Ohio, because one of the things we've done in Ohio is we have been able to reform our Medicaid system, and Brent and Marianne both can tell you how hard it is for legislators and the legislatures to come and affect Medicaid. But one of the biggest things that we changed was to allow our seniors to be able to stay in their own home rather than being forced into a nursing home if they were able to stay in their own home. And that has made a huge amount of savings in the program, and of course, it's great, right? I mean, you can, and we've had an explosion of the number of people who have decided to remain in their own home, because I know we all want to, if we possibly can. And that was a big accomplishment, and the AARP was absolutely thrilled with all that. So we are sensitive to it. We work with it, and so those are a couple things in terms of. So what would I say? Economic growth, the formula that I laid out, and you got to be tough. And you can't just go and go willy-nilly with these things. There can be no favorite sons. You can't have people say, well, can you exempt me? No, you can't do that. And with that, economic growth is going to come jobs and opportunity, better wages, and then we got to take care of the national security. We got to go kill ISIS, and we have to reassume leadership in the world. These are things we have to do. They're actually, some of it is, look, protecting the homeland is tricky. I mean, it's difficult because of this problem of encryption, which we're going to have to deal with. But the things that it takes to get these things done can be done if you have people who are committed to improving the country and not just thinking about themselves. And I think what we've seen in the last few years has been a lack of really strong leadership. So, why don't I take some questions? Or I can ask questions of me, and if I do that, the questions are going to be really easy. Okay, first, John, I'll take your own question. Okay, are you a great guy? Absolutely. Okay, yes, sir, right here.
Governor, do you believe that human activity is a significant contributor to climate change? And if you do, what is your conservative, market-based approach to solving the problem?
Well, significant is that's sort of a clarifier. I think that humans do affect climate change, but the degree to which it is, I think, is still not certain. So what have we been doing? Well, first of all, I think we should have been doing things a long time ago. We should have been developing these renewables like solar and wind. And I also think that it was important, and the country never did it, to get involved in energy efficiency, higher standards so we don't have to use as much energy. So where are we today? Well, I believe that energy efficiency is really important. I think renewables are very important. I think, though, we need an entire energy mix. We need nuclear. We need, if we're going to have coal, which I think we should have, we've got to clean it before we burn it. We have to have, we've got to have natural gas and all the above, solar and wind and geothermal and all those different things. And we've just gone through, in Ohio, over the period of the last 10 years, we've cut emissions by 30%. Now, what I don't like are the imposition of these goals that are not achievable. So that in my state, for example, we have a efficiency standard that the politicians set. And they came up with a number. They might as well have put numbers in a hat and just, put a blindfold on and yanked them out, because there was no scientific way in which they picked the standard. And so what was happening in our state, manufacturing said they were going to have to buy power out of state that was going to cost a lot more, and they were going to have to lay people off. Well, I'm not for that. I'm for a good and clean environment, but I'm also for the fact that we need to have people being able to work. So I think the energy mix in total is what I support, There have been people in Ohio that wanted to just forget about renewables, and I said, we're not doing that. But there's also people that want to have renewables set at a standard that we can't achieve. These things have to be achievable, because if they're not, they're going to cause, I was going to say, economic disruption. That sounds like I've been around politics too long. Job loss. And I don't want to put you out of work to achieve this. I think we can do it over time if we're reasonable. Boy, right here. Ladies first.
First of all, shout out to McKees Rocks and Stowe Rocks High School.
Why did you, what do you know about that?
I grew up in Dormont and Keystone Heights. So.
I grew up at Bethel Park.
Okay, we
You
got a lot
guys
of
grew up in
Pittsburghers
a rich part of
in the
town.
house.
Those are very nice areas. We were pretty tough back in the day when I was at McKees Rocks and Stowe Rocks. You know, what would happen is you'd come to our town and we'd lose a football game, but we'd break all the windows on your bus. I don't know who you are, but I'm just kidding. Okay, right, good. Nice to see you.
Just had a question. What one event in your life can you point to that really shaped you and your values as a person and as a politician?
No, I mean, I've done 42 town hall meetings in New Hampshire, probably another 25 appearances. I don't know how many I've done here now. I'm going to do a lot more. And I've been in politics for a long time. I've never been asked a question like that. So let me give you an answer. Yeah, give her a round of applause. I'm a little hesitant to say this, but the most significant thing that ever happened to me is when my mother and father were killed by a drunk driver. And that was extremely impossible for me to deal with. When I was a little boy, I used to be worried that my father carried mail on his back, okay, in Keys Rocks post office. My mother actually worked in the post office in downtown Pittsburgh, and this was before they had computers, and she would these schemes where they would memorize zip codes. You're shaking your head. You know what I'm talking about? Oh, you don't. Well, I never understood what my mother was doing, but she was smart, not a college degree or anything, but she would work really hard at this. And she would be there into the night, like late. And my father would leave home, and he would drive in what I thought was a very dangerous road, and he would pick my mother up and then come home. And scared me, to be honest with you. I was just afraid one day they wouldn't make it home. And it's kind of ironic that that one night they didn't make it home. And so I headed into a very much of a black hole. I don't know if anybody ever been in the black hole when something happened that was so horrible, huh? That you could barely see. Anybody? Raise your hand if you have. Well, you have. You look through that little bit of light through there. And that's where I really found the Lord. And not that I didn't know him before, but God, to a large degree, for me, was sort of a rabbit's foot. Okay, I want to win this election. Here, give me my rabbit's foot. And what you learn over time when you really study, and that was in 1987, so that was almost 29 years ago. I've spent 28, almost 29 years of my life trying to get this all right. And I'm better. I mean, I'm better with my relationship and all that, but for those that are faithful, you know that it's an everyday process to not get captured by the gravity of our world. Because our world can pull us down, and I mean, to me, it's always a struggle between being pulled down and resisting that and rising. That's kind of the way I look at it. Now, I have no scars at all. It's affected my family, but I have no scars myself. And in fact, as a result of that, it's not very difficult for me to be able to rush the people who are having really tough things happen. And I'm comfortable going and helping And it's changed my life. So I like to say my mom and dad did not die in vain as it came to their son, John. I have 2 daughters who are going to be 16 years old on the 16th of January in 2016, and a great life, and my parents never met them. So it's interesting. But for those that have been through these tragedies, and I see people all the time who are very tough stuff, there is hope. There is a sun that will come up if you give it a chance. And my advice is, friends, and people don't like this, and if they don't like it, I guess that's tough. And I find that faith and belief in a world yet to come and in a higher power that somehow, through all the pain and the misery that we feel, knows what he's doing. And I don't even understand sometimes why these terrible and horrible things happen. But I believe that there's a reason, and I got to tell you, even with faith, you can have perspective, but it does not take away the pain that we all feel. So, you probably didn't expect that tonight, but that's okay. Okay, right here, this gentleman right here. Marion, you call on the people. I don't even call on them. You get up and call on them, okay? This is like being at a beauty pageant. Yes. I went to a beauty pageant one time, and there were like 25 contestants, and I picked one. And then I said, I will never do another beauty pageant. But this family, the dad died, and he was beloved, and he had like 10 or 11 daughters or daughter-in-laws, and they asked me to go to the wake, so I showed up. I was just with the family, and they said, well, that's our younger sister over here. And I looked at her, and I said, well, you don't look any younger than the rest of the people here. And she said, I think you've just lost my vote. I said, well, yeah, I know, but I just won 9 others. So.
Thanks for being here, Governor Kasich. I got 2 questions. As part of my job, I'm a financial advisor, so I talk to folks a lot about integrity of the Social Security system, which you kind of answered and addressed that, what you think could happen there. And one thing I can't answer to a lot of folks, and I don't really know, is the cost of health care and Medicare. I'm curious how you would feel we would fix that issue for down the road. Second question is, I think it's important to have somebody in the Oval Office who has good judgment. And I'd be curious to know if you could give an example of when you had a tough decision to make and what you did to make that decision and how it turned out. So you can give an example of where you exercised good
Sure.
judgment.
Well, I'm at a loss to give you. Listen, as governor, I have the 7th largest state. We go through crisis after crisis after crisis, whether it is the threat of Ebola, whether it is a water shortage that wiped out water for the city of Toledo for, I don't know, 4 days, whether it is going somewhere in the middle of a school shooting, whether it is helping to organize an effort to prevent violence in the community with a controversial court decision. I mean, all the time you have to exercise judgment when you're a governor, and so you have to look at the final result. So I got a grade last November on the job I had done making all these decisions, and I won 86 out of 88 counties, 26% of the African American vote, 51% of union households, 60% of women, and a 30-point victory in a state where we wait for a week to figure out who won. So in the course of all of these things, you have to make decisions, and it's not just that. Sometimes you got to take a position that you are sort of all alone because you just have to. But I try as best I can to, when I see a problem, I look at it and I go fix it. Now everybody's kind of running for president, okay? But I have to explain to you. I'm not particularly interested in getting elected president by telling you something that I don't believe is true. So, I just make decisions on the basis of what I see, and I let the chips fall where they may. But I've been in politics a long, long time, and I've been a troublemaker when I've been in politics because I've always shaken up the system. When you try to balance the budget, you make everybody mad because everybody wants more spending. And but you have to make choices. You just make them, and you make them for the good of everyone. Now, Medicare, we believe we can control the cost of Medicare in a number of ways. First of all, we think you ought to be able to carry on the type of health plan you have when you're working into Medicare. We also think that it shouldn't be a default option that you go into Medicare fee-for-service, but you can go into Medicare Advantage, where you get additional things by being in there and having your care coordinated. We also don't think that you ought to have first dollar coverage on your supplemental policy because we don't want to have an overutilization of the program. And we want to make sure that when you go to get services, we don't want to have too high reimbursement rates or to put you in a setting where the reimbursement rates are going to be really high when you don't need to be there. Now, let me tell you what kind of the answer is to me with health care. And you're going to really find this interesting. I'm going to give you two quick examples. In Columbus, my home, we have a children's hospital and we have an insurance company that decided to work together. One of the leading causes for children to be hospitalized is asthma. One of my daughters actually went to the hospital because she had RSV when she was a little baby. Sometimes you have to go. But they were able to figure out a protocol to keep kids out of the hospital, treat them for asthma. And the family's happier, the kid's not in the hospital. So the hospital gets fewer visits, they make less money. The insurance company makes more money because they didn't pay any claims. These two entities share the good news of keeping the kid out of the hospital. Let me give you another one. Say you went skiing in, where would you go skiing in Iowa? I'm sure you have skiing somewhere, don't you? Huh? Dubuque. Okay, yeah, you got a lot of hills over there. So you go skiing in Dubuque. Okay? We ski in Ohio, too. I mean, as hard as it is to believe. But you go skiing in Dubuque and you break your hip. Here's what we are working on now that I think should be done, and there are other states doing it, it should be done nationally. We know when you have a hip surgery what it costs, because we look at all the hip surgeries that go on, and we find the median. We know who charges more, okay, and we know who charges less. So if you go to a specialist and the specialist gives you a good result and good quality, but their costs are lower than the mean, we give them money. You see, what that does is it drives the market into the system, where we now start to pay people on the basis of keeping us healthy or getting us healthy, rather than, treating us when we're sick. And a perfect example of that is if you were, God forbid, go to the hospital one night and you needed 2 tests. How many tests would they give him if he went to the hospital? You needed 2. She's right there. My girl. That's exactly right. Probably 6, because we don't care and we don't know. So we need to have transparency, and we need to run healthcare in a way that we are working all the time for high quality and lower prices. Because you know what's going to happen? If we keep going with these sky-high costs, and Obamacare doesn't get anywhere near this, has to go. What will happen is the costs are going to keep going up, so they're going to ration. Some are going to get more than others. Who do you think is going to get more? The wealthy. And who's going to get less? My father, the mailman. Okay? That's who would. And that's why we have to avoid it. And so this is a transforming of the whole healthcare system. And we're making a lot of progress. We work with hospitals. You've all heard of the Cleveland Clinic. I mean, they're involved in helping us to figure this out, which we're now spreading to a number of other states, including the state of Tennessee. It's really exciting stuff. And Obamacare's got to go because, the cost of insurance have gone up. We need to get rid of the mandates, bring it down, and make sure when we repeal Obamacare, people can still get health coverage, which I'm confident they can.
There's a question behind you, a woman behind you.
Okay. All right, good. that's fine.
Ohio has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the nation among African Americans. I'm interested to know if you would sign a bill to defund Planned Parenthood's infant mortality prevention programs.
Well, we're not going to fund Planned Parenthood. I mean, we're just not. If I can cut it off, I will, but that doesn't mean we don't want to have women's health. Now, let me tell you about infant mortality. I just received some preliminary statistics, and we've had a significant drop in the problem of infant mortality, although in the minority communities, it's still too stubbornly high. So we have an answer to this, and at least something that we think will help, and that is if you are from one of the hot spots, which there might be 10 or 11 different areas in the state where there's a hot spot, we're going to get the health plans and everybody else, and community leaders, to get everybody together for the prenatal and the postnatal, because we have to work aggressively. I mean, we have to be able to win that battle. So we actually have the health plans are involved in Medicaid, actively working in the community to make sure that we can coordinate care. I think what happens in some of the communities, is that there's not the connections that we need to have. So I don't see this as a Planned Parenthood issue, but we need to make sure that if we don't do Planned Parenthood, that we're able to fund those health assets out there that will administer these kinds of things. Right here, well-dressed man, yes.
Governor, renewable fuels are very important to Iowa's economy, both in employment and in our ag sector. The renewable fuel standard has increased our supply of clean domestic gasoline and biodiesel, on top of spurring investments in our rural community. If you're elected president, would you support the renewable fuel standard as it stands through 2022?
I don't really know what, I need to do a little bit more homework on what exactly that means, but I'm not I am not at this point for doing anything to hurt ethanol. That's what you're really driving at, okay? Now, I used to be against the ethanol subsidy. And the only reason I'm not against the ethanol subsidy today is because I've got ethanol operations in Ohio. And I don't want to kill the subsidy and put people out of work. But I do think that these subsidies have to be phased out over time. If that's accommodated in this renewable fuel standard, because you don't want to change anything overnight, but these standards, you know, first of all, they have to be realistic, and secondly, they shouldn't go for 100 more years. Do you agree with that?
As long as the subsidies for the oil industry are phased out as well.
I don't know that there's many subsidies for the oil industry right now. What would you say that they would be? What would you say that these subsidies would be? Because most of them, look, when on the renewable programs, there are tax credits for solar and wind. There are no tax credits that I'm aware of, but I'm willing to listen. I mean, I want everything really to be level, but I want to tell you this. I'm for developing the renewables. How would it be working tonight in Iowa if we were depending on solar and wind to heat this building? How would it be going? Pardon? It would be what? Then we'd sell more coats. I mean, you know, the problem is, here's the thing. Solar does, I'm going to give you this is really amazing. This is sort of like buy low, sell high. Here's another couple facts I like. When the sun isn't shining, it's hard to get solar energy. And when the wind isn't blowing, that doesn't work so well. So what we hope is that we're going to see the development of battery technology so you can begin to store this. And I think it's important that we develop renewables. I mean, I really do. I think it's really important because I think the environment is important, but I'm not in favor of worshiping it. I'm just in favor of taking care of it and improving it. Okay? Yes, right back there with the star on your chest.
I have family in Palmer, Ohio, by the way, so
Great.
say hi. Last night I heard a lot about war. We're at war with ISIS.
Yeah.
You are in Congress. You know that we have authorization for the use of military force. And last was voted on in 2001. And a lot of people running for president are saying that that one passed almost 15 years ago is good enough. We don't need a new one. But the president said in his address 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
vote on a new one. Are you in favor of a new one? Should Congress be voting on a new one?
You know, it seems to me they should. I don't know what the holdup is. I've never asked anybody. But, you know, I would vote on anything to go to war with ISIS. And look, I'm not really, you know, I served in Congress for a long time and had a vote on a number of things related to war. I had a vote on the first Gulf War. I mean, I had a vote on U.S. involvement in Lebanon, where I voted for us not to be involved. I did not want us to be involved in civil wars. I don't like that idea, but in the first Gulf War, you know, where Saddam invaded Kuwait, I was for that. And I believe we've passed a resolution on war, but I forget what year that was. But yeah, I see nothing wrong with it. I don't know what the holdup is, but I don't know, does the president want to do anything about ISIS? I can't figure out what it is. Seems more involved in climate talks than he is ISIS. But look, and here's the reason why. Here's what it is about ISIS. And we've never quite had an enemy that I have ever studied who's not interested in territory. You know, I'll take this country, you give me this city, and then we can kind of live together. That's not what this threat is. I hate to say this, but I would not be telling you the truth if I didn't tell you these people want to destroy Western culture. I mean, they don't think that women are anything but property. I mean, they are intent on destroying our very way of life. And I can give you more graphic examples about the way they behave, but I don't think we need to do more of that tonight. But we need to take them out. And at the same time, I believe we do have to communicate our values worldwide. Now, I said this some time ago. People got all worked up about it. And then last night I heard it a couple of times, which is great. It means that that message is working. And then we need to protect ourselves here. And how do we do that? Well, the way we do it here is we have things called the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, which are headed by the FBI, and they're comprised of local law enforcement. I don't know what Iowa's looks like. Brent, do you or Marianne, do you know, Brent? I mean, it's, I don't know if you have one here, but they're in all parts of the country. And what they are is they're made up of local law enforcement along with the FBI. The challenge that we had in San Bernardino is this couple. I mean, in addition to this whole waiver program or the K-1 program, the problem we had there is we couldn't hear these people planning. And there weren't any red flags that popped up that we heard about, law enforcement did, so that we could foil the plot. And so I think it's really, really important that we protect ourselves at home. We take care of this existential threat over there. And, you know, I look at Russia. I mean, I don't want to have Russia as an enemy, but they can't go invading countries. And I don't look at China as an enemy. They're a reality, but they can't control the South China Sea and steal all of our industrial and governmental secrets. So war is not what we want, but war is where we're going to have to go if we're going to stop this. And it seems to me as though if we're going to go, I can see nothing wrong with the Congress approving. Why wouldn't they? I don't know what's going on in that regard, but it seems to me they should go ahead and approve it. Okay? Yes, right here, young lady.
Hey, so thanks for coming out to Iowa. My question is about, I've heard reports saying that you don't actually answer the questions regarding the immigrant detention mandate. 34,000 immigrants are being detained each day. It's actually part of the appropriations.
You know what? I just read about this.
Yeah,
I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I didn't avoid answering the question.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer a question if I don't know the facts around. This seems as though this is a program that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Okay. So
Now, I've only read one part. I don't know. I'd have to check it out. But it seems to me as though we just don't want to tell a government operation that you need to be more effective, and then you do these things that run up costs. Because I've been told that we've detained people who have never broken the law. So I don't know enough about it, but I did read about it, and it's something that I'm interested in. That's going to do.
Would you be comfortable with us providing information?
Oh, yeah. I got to get both sides of this, okay? But from what I have read, and I think this information probably came from your group, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So get me what you have. We will go back. I'm going to find out the other side of it, and then I can make a decision, okay? Right before you guys have so many questions tonight. I mean, I just went through 2 hours standing last night. No, let's do as many as we can. I'll try to be as short as I can. Go ahead.
ISIS wants the world to believe that America is at war with Islam. As president, how are you going to convince our Muslim allies that we are not at war with Islam?
Because of the statements I've made. I mean, I was in Las Vegas last night, walking through after the debate, and a man from Egypt, was he from Egypt, Doug? Remember the man, he had his wife with him, where were they from? They're from Saudi Arabia. He walked up to me, he said, I appreciate the fact that you haven't been out there condemning all of us, because he didn't say that, but what he was like, thank you, because I've heard you. So we're not at war with Islam. Islam, as I was on television on Sunday, on Face the Nation, because they were saying we should keep all the Muslims out and all that, it's just an infinitesimal number who have hijacked that religion and distorted it and used that religion in a way to try to kill people in a total and complete distortion. So, no, I think our Muslim friends, last night, if you saw the debate, I was very pleased that Saudi Arabia has now organized a group of Arab nations, like 35 of them, that want to take on terrorism. We're all, the Jordanians, the Saudis, the Gulf states, the Egyptians, they all know that they're next on the chopping block. So but America's got to lead. But this is not a war on Islam. Okay? And I would invite these moderate Muslim countries to help communicate a message worldwide. We're not at war with Islam. Yes? Yes, sir.
This is actually more of a comment than a question.
Okay.
And it's getting back to the discussion about tax incentives for alternative energy. I used to be a utility commissioner here in Iowa, and I can tell you that there is an argument that there are tax incentives, tax breaks for fossil fuels that we don't normally think about, and I'm just going to give you the argument. That is that the renewable fuels, their tax benefits tend to be credits that are put on top of the tax code, essentially. They're kind of visible, they're out there for everybody to see. They have to be renewed every few years. Obviously, the coal and gas industry doesn't get those, but the renewable folks often say that they would give up all of that stuff that they get if they could have the same type of depreciation treatment and the same type of access to a particular type of corporate structure that's baked into the tax code for the fossil fuel industry that doesn't have to be renewed, it's not visible, it's not transparent, that the tax consequences or the revenue consequences of those benefits are far greater than the ones they get. It's also something that nobody ever thinks about because it doesn't have to be renewed. I don't know if that's correct, that is significantly more generous than what the fossil fuel industry gets.
Tax credit's pretty darn good, means you don't pay
Right.
taxes. So.
But they're
Well, I'll check it out.
Like
Look,
it's a master limited partnership arrangement where they get all the advantages.
You mean the MLP,
Not the disadvantage.
Yeah.
Just something that's an argument.
Look, I think it's worth for me pursuing that, but I don't think you're going to find, there used to be, this, the depletion allowance, that doesn't exist anymore. Now, you may be right, but I think, I will say that I'll go back and look again.
You're saying that's the argument that's made.
Well, I know, but I hear that. I just tell people, give it to me, show it to me. Because my mind is open, to it. And what they think, what some of them think is, look, for renewables, I'm not for killing the credits and all that. But there's no sort of scheme in my mind to make sure that one gets and the other one doesn't. That's not the issue. The issue is we need a fuel mix. And I'll tell you, if we don't have a fuel mix, you worry about things like ethanol here. You know what's going to happen? We get low-priced energy. You realize we get jobs. And we get manufacturing jobs, because one of the greatest advantages we have as a country is the low price of energy. We're becoming energy independent. So I don't have if you could produce something cheaper doing a renewable, hallelujah. And solar prices have come down, which has been a good development. But I'll go back and look at MLPs and maybe there's some things that we need to think about. But I'm open to, but you have to also be realistic, right? You were on the Public Utility Commission here. Did you get elected to that?
No, it's appointed.
Yeah. And how was that job?
That was a great job.
Oh, really? Yes, ma'am, right here.
My question is about clean energy and the surrounding economy. As you know, there's over 7,000 jobs in the wind industry.
Well, I don't know. People throw these numbers out, and I'm
Well,
not sure of them.
We have.
Okay.
And we've
Where?
created over 900 jobs
Here?
in the solar industry, and the price of electricity has been going down in Iowa. As a result, we've been able to attract two
What's the
major
mix?
data centers.
But what is the mix of the amount of renewables that are powering Iowa as compared to the conventional sources of energy?
We have the highest percentage of any U.S. state, 28.5%.
So 28% of your energy out here is driven by wind and solar.
28% with solar.
Right.
Yeah, so what are your plans for your administration to grow more of those type of private sector jobs in Iowa and across the country?
Well, government doesn't grow jobs. Government just creates an environment for job creation. And if people can make money doing that, they will. So I don't have a plan. I don't like the idea of subsidies. Because why do I want to take taxpayer money to fund something that can't make it on its own? Now, if you got, the wind is efficient here, that's great. I'm surprised to hear that 28%. That's a great number. We don't come close to that in the state of Ohio. But you have wind. We don't have that. And, well, we have it someplace. I know we have wind. We have wind up in Toledo. There's areas of the state. But we have a very hard time. I can just tell you now, we have a renewable standard that's 25%. We can't meet it. I've had some of the biggest industrial companies in our state come to me and say, if you keep the standard on, we will have to buy our power out of state in places like Iowa. They didn't say Iowa, but that's what I'm hearing. It'll cost more money. So if it costs more money, their costs go up. So they can't pay their workers. So I'm not going to do that. But I'm for developing renewables. I think I've said this now 10 times. If I just sort of, I'm for it. But I'm not for having a government plan to sort of drive these industries. I'm for government programs that reduce the pressure on business, that reduce regulation, that reduce taxes. That's what I'm for, particularly for small business. And I think from that will come the kinds of results that we would like. The minute we get involved in planning the economy, it'd be like me planning the weather. It doesn't usually go very well.
Governor, I think there might be one over there behind Mary Ann.
Where?
Somebody, I think.
Governor, the Fed raised interest rates yesterday or today, I forget already.
Today?
I heard some commentary on TV about the effect that'll have after 10 years of zero interest rates on the deficit and the national debt. And I know you're a hawk on that stuff. And I just wonder if you could talk about...
Now, we assume under our plan that would get us to a balanced budget. Actually, we'll get there in 8 years. We think if we enact the plan, I mean, realistically, it could maybe come sooner, maybe 7 years or 6 years. I don't want to make numbers up. And we assume a 1% increase in interest rates. And this is, I think, 50%, 0.5%.
And I was just going to say, if you could talk a little bit about how, obviously the Fed sets interest rates, but, what the president can do with respect to how it affects the entire economy.
Well, you need to get the budget down. You need to have fiscal discipline, and you need to have economic growth. The problem with the zero interest rates is companies were exercising, accumulating more debt and buying stock back to drive up their stock price. But they weren't investing in the enterprise. And here's the thing, I give it like an economics lesson tonight, but if companies are not investing in plant and equipment to give workers higher productivity, wages don't move. There have been a lot of stories written about this recently. And so when we look at our economy and we look at economic growth, we're still not doing very well. And the reason why we're not doing very well is because we're not investing in plant and equipment the way we need to. Now in my state, wages are rising faster than the national average. The reason that's happening is Ohio's become more diversified. So we have a whole mix of jobs, some of which require higher skills and some of which therefore pay more. So I think the Fed's done the right thing. I think the rate should have gone up sooner. And as they go up, there's not an incentive to borrow money to boost their stock price, but rather to invest in plant equipment, which is what workers need. Way in the back, yes, sir. One with a beard.
With healthcare costs, on average, every hour, Alzheimer's and related dementias cost this country $17.5 million, 24/7. It is the most expensive. It will triple, in estimated by 2020, we're looking at billions of dollars in cost. Now, there's more money. I see Congress just enacted in the new budget. There's a $300 million increase in research. But since I'm a patient, I have dementia, there isn't much in how to live with the problem. And it's becoming more and more common. I know people in their 40s who have dementia, and many people in the medical community, unless they're really specialists, they say you don't have that. But they're starting to show symptoms. And the economic cost of families and people taking care of these people is staggering. Is there some way to look at better ways to best practices for living with the disease and trying to keep people so they don't end up in institutions, jacking up the institutional costs?
Well, I think, like that's what we're talking about NIH. I mean, I believe that basic research into all these diseases is critical. And I think we can significantly increase the National Institute of Health because this research we need breakthroughs. I mean, people that go through this with their family, who do we have? Have I met you people before? No? Have I met you before? Okay. We have not met. So who do you have what has brought you into this?
First, I want to thank you for joining us. My mom is 7, and she was diagnosed with my dad.
Yeah.
She's doing really well, but my fear is what health has.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. My Uncle George, he just lost his wife and this week, and she didn't have that, but she was, I don't know, 87 or whatever. He was unbelievable, his dedication to her. And we know that people who have things like Alzheimer's, that the caregivers, that their health can decline. We know that. So the best way to deal with it is to try to figure out how to cure it. It's not just Alzheimer's. There's a lot of diseases out there. Where people, they get this and some of the cancers are just pancreatic cancer. I'll give you another one, ALS. I just met a guy in Florida who has ALS. So I believe that a robust funding, as long as we're stripping out, we don't want to give people money and then they're burning it up in some overhead, but I just think that research has to happen. The other thing that I think about a lot is, and I have not worked through this, but something that I think we need to make long-term care insurance affordable. I have long-term care insurance, my wife does as well, but it is extremely expensive. But the long-term care insurance, if you have it, will provide for caregivers to come into the house. Of course, the challenge then gets to be the caregivers themselves, because they don't always get paid. Now, mine is with Northwestern Mutual, and I've never really checked out the caregivers, but I think it's probably pretty good. But it's extremely expensive. And what we know, sir, is that you're very young. How old are you?
68.
Okay, young man. And what we know is that the baby boomers are living longer and longer and longer, so we're more susceptible to this. So I think we think about long-term care, and I think we're going to find more and more physicians beginning to, in gerontology, try to figure out what we can do to slow it down, and what you can do to keep yourself as healthy as you possibly can. And that gets to the medical schools and the study of gerontology. I mean, these are tough issues, but I think some robust funding, some new ways of thinking about long-term care insurance, and maybe the medical school is beginning to think about how we know that over time there's going to be greater and greater interest in the issue of aging because we're all doing it. And I mean, we're all literally doing it because we're all getting older, and we're going to be here a very long time in most cases. So that needs to be focused on as well. The president can begin to launch, you know, I mean, again, I don't have some great plan here, but a president can launch an initiative to wipe some of these diseases out. You know, we had an initiative, it's a good idea, I think it's a really good idea. We had an initiative to go to the moon. Maybe there are some diseases that we need to focus on and say we're going to make a commitment to wiping them out. Would you make a note on that, Chris? I want to think about it. Okay? Yes, right? Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Last night at the debate, there was much talk about terrorism and sort of spreading fear, and ISIS is scary. I will admit to that. But the thing that concerns me, and I have more fear of, is all the gun deaths in the U.S. Since 9/11, we've had 400,000 people killed by guns in the U.S. We've had 45 killed by jihadist terrorists. So something needs to be done about the guns. And we have a lot of publicity when there's a mass shooting, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Domestic abuse, suicides, homicide, and what really is heartbreaking to me is when you hear of a 2-year-old killing themselves or by a 4-year-old. So I just want to know what you can do, what you would do about gun violence.
Well, we're all, you know, I'm governor now, so there's lots of things I could do. I don't have to be president to do that. I think we need to enforce the laws. You know, I think we need to be in a position of where, you know, they're selling gun at a gun show, you're held accountable for who you sell your gun to. I think that when it comes to the issue of mental illness, which we focused on a lot in the state of Ohio, states need to upload information in regard to the mentally ill, because we don't want the mentally ill being able to buy a gun. And states need to be held accountable for that, because some of them are not doing that. But I would also say to you that I don't really think that, I'm a kind of a believer, in a way, that the bumper sticker is right. When guns are outlawed, outlaws will have guns. And I think people want to be able to protect themselves, and they really want to protect themselves more now than ever. So what I would say is, I don't want to violate the Second Amendment, but let's enforce the laws that we have on the books, and I think that will go a long way towards helping us.
Well, one of the things, the ATF, it's hard for them to have much teeth because of the NRA lobbying, denied funding, the NRA lobbying so that we suppress research on guns. I mean, I don't think the people should take their guns taken away. I think that is a Second Amendment right, but a well-regulated. I mean,
well, I think we should.
Semi-automatics and things like that. We can regulate and still have people have guns. Over 300 million guns in the U.S. I mean, they have more guns than the military. So something needs to be done.
Well, I would tell you again, I think we should enforce the laws, and we talk about semi-automatics. I mean, there were efforts to control them, but these are, what are you going to do? You're not going to go into people's homes to take their guns. Yeah. So enforce the laws.
There was a law for semi-automatics, and then for automatics.
Well, yeah, we don't allow people to buy automatic weapons now. They got to get some special certificate to do it, but you can't go around buying automatic weapons. Yes, sir, right here. What happened to your hand?
Oh, I recently had another tongue.
Oh, okay.
It's healing nicely.
At least it wasn't a bowling injury, right?
It could have been worse.
Yeah, it could have. How's it coming?
It's doing fine.
Good.
So thank you for coming tonight, Governor. Will you support, assuming that you're elected, will you support the wind protection tax credit, which this is a follow-up to several other questions you had tonight? It will produce jobs for thousands of Iowans, and it is supported by Senator Grassley and by our Governor Branstad.
Well, I said I don't think there's any reason to change that at this point. I think you're going to have some subsidies in there to get this industry going. So But if you're asking me to make a commitment in 5 years from now, what I'm going to do with a credit, I can't make a commitment like that. And I mean, if I made a commitment like that and I took it away, you'd come to Washington and, you know, hold a sign outside the White House saying you didn't tell me the truth. But I think these industries need to have some subsidies, and the quicker they go away, the better. Okay?
Alex Young with One Campaign. I think you're familiar with that. If elected president, what would you do to combat extreme global poverty and preventable disease?
Well, I work, how do you know that I know about what you do? Yeah, because I was one of the first people to get involved in it. So, there are some things that I know. I worked early on with Bono on the issue of global poverty, and George Bush did a good job on it. And I think it's important that in the case of this, we take steps that we can to make sure that the people who we're trying to help are helped. That's what I liked about Bono. I mean, I've been to Rwanda. I was there after the war and visited with a lot of people there and saw, really abject poverty. There are things we can do. And part of it is clean water, vaccinations, mosquito netting. I mean, some of it is pretty darn simple, and other things are more complicated. The reason why I think it's important we do this is that at the same time we talk a lot about war. It's also important that we also show the heart of America. And as long as we get the money there, we don't want to be putting money in dictators' pockets. But I believe there's a lot we can do to improve our image. Not so much improve our image, but if something happens that we got people, we have a bomber flying over an Alaskan or an African village. I want some women out there saying, yeah, they may be flying that bomber, but they also vaccinated my children. And that's how I got involved with the One campaign. And we can't have it be political, though. Tell them I said that, would you? I warned Bono about that. Yes.
I have 2 questions, and you can just answer them yes or no.
Well, I might not want to answer.
Okay.
It is my town hall meeting. Okay, but I'll do my best.
People want to ask.
I'll do my best.
What is your opinion on
Open a door. It's like 100 degrees in here. Somebody open a door. Go ahead.
What is your opinion on the TPP? I know it's
On the what?
The TPP, the Trans-Pacific.
I'm for it.
You are for
I
it?
am for it.
Okay. And the other one is...
The reason I'm for it is because I think there's so many jobs connected to trade, and secondly, I want us to have friends and allies and people that we have partnerships with in Asia, because it's important in a strategic way, not just an economic way, a strategic way, because of China's sometimes wanting to do things that I think are overly aggressive and not good. Okay?
My other question is, you were talking about Social Security. Have you considered to keep it going longer by raising the cap, which means if you make $118,000, you pay this much. If you're a millionaire, you pay the same amount. Have you considered raising the cap?
Right. Right now, if you raise the cap, that means people's benefits will go up, and that's the way it works. The more you pay in, the more you get out. So that gets back to, are we okay? We got wind, okay. That is just perfect. See? You do have wind in Iowa. Coming off the plane. But my sense is that the people who do have the higher incomes are the ones that are going to have to get less when we get to that critical period. How much less? We're still working through it. Okay? How about we can take one, we'll do 2 more. Ma'am, right here, you're patient. Yes.
So, I'd love to hear questions I give us 10 years
I don't use those.
You're not saying yes.
No, I've been in Ohio so long.
So, you mentioned earlier about the sad truth that ISIS and the Taliban treat women like property. And we here in America have fought long and hard for rights for women, including the right to vote. So I'm concerned about your condemnation of Planned Parenthood. I mean, shouldn't women have the right to go to Planned Parenthood if they want to get pap smears and birth control? And do you just buy into the propaganda against Planned Parenthood?
Well, it depends if you consider it propaganda or not.
Well, what about
we're
all the pap
wrestling,
smears
yeah.
and birth
Well, look,
control?
we're wrestling with an issue in Ohio right now where we found out that Planned Parenthood has been being able to do, what's the word? Planned Parenthood has been disposing of these fetal parts in a landfill, okay? Pardon?
It's $50.
No, it's not debunked in my state, we know it's true. Now we gotta figure out, because we don't think these parts ought to be displayed in a landfill. So now we're trying to figure out, okay, if they say, well, we don't have the money to do it any other way. Now, that's not debunked. But look, I'm for women's health. We will fund women's health and will continue to, whether it is the problem with infant mortality. But I think this organization has discredited itself, and I understand people support it. I don't. So they can do their thing. It's just I'm not going to put government money in. But right now we can't. We can't cut it off because we can cut off part of it, but we can't cut it all off because of the federal government will take our Medicaid money away. But I don't want you to be confused about it. I'm not for them, but I also want you to know I believe in robust funding for women's health. Last one, way in the back, sir. You get the lucky ticket, and you get a canned ham for coming tonight.
Thank you, Governor. A few years ago, I found myself unemployed and unable to get health insurance. And then I was able to find a job, and they did not offer health insurance. And because I had let my insurance lapse, I was not able to get any health insurance. I tried to the state, every program I could. I was completely uninsurable.
Well, why were you uninsurable?
Well, I have a chronic illness.
Okay. Nobody should be denied health insurance because of a pre-existing condition.
Well, my question is, I've heard so much about repealing Obamacare, and I just want to know, do you have a plan for those who cannot get insurance?
I do. I would first of all bring some of the resources from the federal government into the state combined with Medicaid to be able to cover the working poor. And there is no way that we should say that are you kidding me? There is no, it could be any of us, right? No, you get a pre-existing condition, you got to get insurance. And we can do it in a variety of ways, including risk pools, but you cannot be denied that. You go and you work, you have a house, and you get sick, and you lose everything. That's not our country. So there is no way that I would go for anything like that. Look, we just, not only for issues like that, but in Ohio now we're providing coverage on autism. I expanded Medicaid in my state so that we could have the money that is necessary for the working poor, the mentally ill, for the drug addicted. You don't turn your back on those kinds of things. Because that's not the way I was raised, and these people who know where I'm from will tell you we just don't behave that way. We stick together. It's important that we do. So, sir, that's the scariest thing. I'm sick, I can't change my job, or I can't get insurance. Do you have it now?
I do have, yes.
Yes.
But only because of the Affordable Care Act.
I will tell you this. I will have no plan in this country if I'm president, and if I'm not president, and they repeal it, and I'm still the governor of Ohio, we will cover people who have pre-existing conditions. Period and end of story. Okay? Okay, listen, Merry Christmas. Thank you all very much.